Have you ever looked at your dog, really looked, and just thought, what in the world are you? You're definitely not alone. Millions of us are swabbing our dog's cheeks, sending off that little sample, and just waiting to unlock all their genetic secrets. But what happens when the results come back and they just don't add up? Well, today, we're going to decode the real science behind these canine DNA kits to figure out what they can and what they absolutely can't tell us about our four-legged family members.
And boom, right out of the gate, we hit the central mystery. This quote from a Reddit user, this is something you hear all the time. You spent your hard-earned money on not one, but two of these tests, and you get back two completely different origin stories for your dog. So what's the deal? Are these tests just a bit of fun, or is there something way more complicated going on under the hood?
So let's back up for a second. Why are we so obsessed with these tests in the first place? To really get the science, you first have to understand the incredible promise they're making to every single dog owner out there.
Look, it really boils down to two huge questions. First, there's the fun one. What is my dog's family tree? Is she part beagle, part boxer, part kangaroo? And then there's the much more serious question. Are there any hidden health bombshells I should know about? These two questions right here, they're the engine that drives this entire industry.
All right, so let's tackle that first question head on. How in the world does a lab take a little bit of your dog's drool and turn it into a detailed family tree?
It all kicks off with that simple cheek swab you do at home. From there, your dog's sample goes on this pretty wild journey. In the lab, scientists pull out the DNA, and then these super powerful computers scan it for thousands of tiny genetic markers. The best way to think about it is like a unique barcode for your dog. The company's algorithm then takes that barcode and frantically searches its massive library of purebred dog barcodes, looking for matches.
And when I say massive, I am not kidding. We're talking about companies like Wisdom Panel that have built these incredible reference databases with DNA from over 27,000 verified purebred dogs from all over the world. Honestly, the size and the quality of this database, that's the single biggest factor in how accurate these tests can be. Which, of course, brings us right back to our original mystery. So get this, these are the actual results from that Reddit user. Embark says their dog is 50%, a full half Labrador. But Wisdom Panel, they say it's mostly Chow Chow. So what gives? Well, it all comes down to the fact that each company has its own secret sauce, its own private database, and its own special algorithm for making sense of it all. They're looking at the same raw genetic data from the same dog, but they're running it through different systems and coming to totally different conclusions. And you'll notice both of them have that super mutt category. That's basically their catch-all bucket for the DNA that's just too jumbled up to identify.
And, it gets even trickier. Take the whole dog-wolf connection. Genetically, they are incredibly similar. Scientists have found that there are actually very few fixed genetic differences between them. This makes it almost impossible to say with any real confidence that a dog is, 12% wolf if that wolf ancestor was more than a few generations back. The signal just gets too faint.
But here's the real mind bender, the thing that complicates all of this. The very concept of a breed, it's not some concrete scientific category. It's a human invention. As researchers have pointed out, there's no single universally agreed upon genetic definition of what makes a golden retriever a golden retriever. These are lines that we've drawn in the sand through breeding over centuries, and genetically, those lines can be surprisingly fuzzy. So that makes the algorithm's job, incredibly difficult.
Okay, so let's switch gears and talk about the health screening side of these tests. This is where the stakes get a whole lot higher, and where understanding the difference between a certainty and a clue is absolutely vital. Before we jump in, we have to define the gold standard of genetic testing, and that is finding what's called a causative mutation. Think of your dog's DNA like a giant instruction manual for building and running its body. A causative mutation is like finding a specific, known typo in that manual that you know for a fact is going to cause a problem down the line. It's not a guess, it's not a hint, it's the smoking gun. And honestly, this slide right here, this is the heart of the matter. This is the most important thing you need to understand. Not all health tests are created equal. Far from it. So let's break it down. First, you've got the direct or causative test. That's our gold standard. It finds the actual genetic typo. This gives you actionable certainty. Then you have a marker test. This is different. It doesn't find the typo itself, but it finds a stretch of DNA that's often found near the typo. It's a clue, but it's not a diagnosis. Finally, there's a risk variant test. This is all about statistics. It just tells you if your dog has a gene that is statistically linked to a higher probability of a disease. It's just one data point, not your dog's destiny.
So here's the crucial point. The language on the report can be really misleading if you don't know which type of test was used. For example, if a direct test for a recessive disease says your dog is a carrier, that just means they have one copy of the gene. They won't get sick, but they could pass it on. But if a report says your dog is at risk, you have to stop and ask, at risk based on what? If it's from a direct test for a dominant disease, yeah, the outcome is pretty certain. But if that at-risk result is from a marker test, your dog might live its entire life perfectly healthy. See the difference? It's huge.
So how does all this genetic science play out differently between purebred dogs and our beloved mixed breeds? Well, their genetic architecture is actually pretty distinct. Every single purebred dog breed in existence started with a pretty small group of original dogs, or founders, and over generations of very careful selective breeding, certain genes, for looks, for temperament, for skills, get concentrated, they're amplified. At the same time, other genes are actively purged or removed. This process is what creates that consistent breed standard, but the trade-off is that it reduces overall genetic diversity and can accidentally concentrate the genes for hereditary diseases too. Mixed breed dogs, on the other hand, are a totally different story. Their gene pool is this vast, swirling galaxy of diversity. Now, they can still carry genes for common issues like allergies, sure, but those specific mutations for rare breed-specific diseases, they're scattered so randomly and so widely that it's much, much less likely a dog will happen to inherit two copies of the same faulty gene from its parents. Think of it like a lottery. In a purebred, you're drawing tickets from a small bucket, so your odds of getting a specific one are higher. In a mixed breed, you're drawing from a giant barrel.
Okay, so we've covered the wild world of breed ID, and we've waded through the serious stuff with health screening. What does this all mean for you, the dog owner, when that email with the results finally lands in your inbox?
All right, here are the key takeaways. This is what you need to remember. First and most importantly, think of these tests as a fascinating tool for gathering clues, not as a crystal ball that's predicting the future. Second, before you have any reaction to a health result, find out what kind of test it was. Was it a direct test, a marker test, or a risk variant? And please, never ever panic over a result without talking to your veterinarian first. They're the ones who can put it all into the proper context for your specific dog. And finally, for breeders, those causative test results, those are the real deal, and they can and should be used to make really smart, responsible breeding decisions.
This quote from a poodle breeder who's also a genetics educator just sums it all up perfectly. Certainty, clues, and probabilities. Knowing which one you're looking at, that is the absolute key to using this powerful information the right way.
And all of this leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to chew on. For centuries, right, we've defined our dogs by their breeds, these labels that we humans created based on what they looked like and what jobs they did. But as we get better and better at reading the actual language of their DNA, those old labels might start to seem, well, less important. We might be moving from a world of breeds to a world of individuals, where every dog has its own unique genetic story to tell. And that might just change everything about how we think about man's best friend.